Good evening and welcome to the miNEStry. I am Archbishop Dracul, and alongside me is Father Avram. Our creed is to inspire our parishioners with reflections on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Tonight we are reflecting on the Immortal, which was developed by Sandcastle, published by Electronic Arts, and released in North America in November of 1990. Electronic Arts only published one other North American release on the NES, which was Skate or Die 2, The Search for Double Trouble. I never played it. Tonight our visiting Deacon is professor, author of the Minds Behind the Games book series, owner of Legacy Comics, and voice actor, Mr. Patrick Hickey Jr. Welcome.
Thank you guys. Pleasure to be here in your excellence.
We're really happy to have you. Anything you'd like to say? Any news? Anything coming up? Interesting?
Yeah, we've got a whole slew of great comics coming from Legacy Comics this winter and this spring. You guys are fans of noir, like stuff like Daredevil and Wolverine. We've got tons of great indie comics coming your way. I've got several voice acting projects on the loo that I can't speak too much about, but I'm super excited about. The Minds Behind the PlayStation 2 games is doing really well. Got 6 other books in that series, so still writing for Old School Gamer magazine. Write a couple of articles a month for them, so just staying in there and doing some great stuff in the video game and comic book industries.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what you have on the horizon, because it seems like you always have some crazy project going on, and it's always good stuff. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, I'm lucky to be in the service and gratitude of such humble, God-fearing men.
Thank you.
A testament to the creators. Will Harvey, lead designer, Sandcastle founder, known for developing the music software music construction set for the Apple II in 1983, which predated Apple's GarageBand by 21 years. He also ported Atari's Marble Madness, 1986, for the Apple II Commodore 64, and worked on Zany Golf in 1988 for the Apple II GS.
I must say, it's kind of interesting to me that for having a game on the cover that embellishes Will Harvey Presents on it, I would have expected a little bit more of a pedigree here.
The thing is, too, in early Electronic Arts, they were nuts for music construction set, and they were all about the creator as being an artist, and he was one of the first big name developers. So they pushed him mega hard. If you ask Don Traeger, the producer of this game, EA was all in on Will Harvey in the 80s and early 90s.
We should also mention that, just for full disclosure, that Patrick has interviewed a couple of the developers for his book Mind Behind the Sega Genesis games. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? You obviously sprinkle us with inside information, so to speak.
Sure.
Did you find that to be a good process as far as finding information about this game?
Oh, yeah. The developers gave so much great stuff. So EA, they were mad scientists on the Nintendo and the Genesis. They completely backwards engineered the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. They created their own carts, obviously, everyone knows, for the Sega Genesis, but they tried to do something similar on the Nintendo, but it didn't work out to the same success because, as you beautifully stated before, that there was only those 2 North American releases, but they spent a significant amount of manpower trying to understand the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. And I think that's the reason why this game does a lot of really cool things on the Nintendo. So that's why when we had an opportunity to speak about this earlier, it was yeah, I totally want to talk to you guys about this one.
Chime in whenever you'd like. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Father Avram.
Brett G. Durrett, I hope I'm saying that correctly, designer, worked on SimCity 1989 for the Macintosh. He was the programmer for that. Worked on Zany Golf, 1990. This is the Genesis version. And also Allied General, 1995. For Windows, he was the executive producer for that game.
SimCity, man, what a phenomenon that was.
It really was. I remember specifically in 6th grade, my teacher having this game on his computer in our classroom, and he would let us play it every once in a while, like randomly, I guess when he was feeling like he didn't really want to deal with us. And so we would hover around this computer like, oh, look at this, and oh, I gotta put this electricity here. It really was quite something. It seemed like, looking back on it, in like playing SimCity for the first time, it felt larger than life.
I love SimCity. I love SimCity on pretty much every console. The first time I played SimCity was on Super Nintendo, and then on I remember SimCity 2000 on PlayStation, which was just amazing because you were able to do so much more on the PlayStation than you were on the Super Nintendo. To go back to like what you guys are saying, like naming those games as Zany Golf and SimCity, Don Traeger, the producer of this game, of the Immortal, was also the producer on Marble Madness. So it's like, and Don Traeger was eventually a founding father of the Electronic Arts Sports Network, which eventually became EA Sports. So it's like the Immortal plays a crucial role in electronic arts becoming the phenomenon that it ultimately is. A lot of people like don't see that, but it's like having people like Will Harvey in their stable allowed them to like really bring over other game developers that wanted like this type of fanfare and attention paid towards them. So it's like when you talk about the Immortal, a lot of people like just say, oh, that's cool box art and this and that and the other thing, but it's just like it really laid the groundwork for the way Electronic Arts treated their developers, and having them in a really nice way, let's say this in a nice way because we are in a cathedral, raid other developers like Accolade. They took so many great developers from Accolade to help found like EA Sports. They took so many guys from Atari's, at this time, the late 80s, Atari's only powerhouse division, their arcade and coin-op division, and bring them over to EA. So EA was like in total like building mode, and they took the best from everywhere else. And Immortal was definitely like one of those titles where they were like, yeah, well, we got this guy, and look at how we treat him, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So super important title just for that alone.
Another title that comes to mind that came out around the same time that was really influential for me was General Chaos.
Yep. And they took those guys from Midway Williams, and I interviewed those guys in my Sega Genesis book as well. And this is the thing too. One of the reasons why I want to talk to you guys about Immortal too is because when we think about Electronic Arts, we think about sports games. Notice all of the great Electronic Arts games that we're talking about right now are anything but sports. So they had this rich legacy of non-sports games that they just completely deviated from. And now they don't have that anymore. So, but EA was founded on great games that weren't sports, and then they did this transition into sports. They got the taste of that yearly re-release of games, and they started making a ton of money, and they kind of left this whole thing that really set them apart in the dust. And Immortal is definitely one of those things that got left in the dust.
You're like a walking encyclopedia of early game development. It's awesome having you on here.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Father Avram.
Ian Gooding, artist for Immortal. He also worked on Zany Golf 1988 for Apple II GS. He went on to become a background artist on Disney's Aladdin, and has continued to work for Disney on many, many films over the years in background art, character design, and look development to include Tarzan and Encanto.
Yeah, and this is no surprise to me. The art in the Immortal on across the board is unmatched as far as I'm concerned.
Which we'll get into in more detail.
We will once we get to the graphics section. Please proceed, Father Avram.
Rob Hubbard, composer. He worked on over 150 games, including Road Rash in 1991 for the Genesis, NHL 94 in 1993 for the Genesis Sega CD, and Wing Commander 3 Heart of the Tiger in 1996 for the PlayStation.
Can I just say, how awesome Road Rash was. Such a good game. So much fun. A lot of replayability.
You know how they pitched that game, right, to Electronic Arts?
How'd they do that?
They showed Akira, the anime,
Oh, really?
at the pitch meeting. They show Tetsuo, riding the bike, and they're like, this is what this game is going to feel like.
Huh.
I interviewed one of the designers.
That's a crazy little piece of trivia, actually.
Yeah, and he was like, that's what we did. We just showed them that, and we were like, this is what we're going to go with. This game is going to feel like really fast and badass. He was telling me a story, one of the developers, he's like, I would ride my bike to work every day. And he's like, I would just want to punch people because that's what we were doing in the game, So pretty crazy stuff, man. It's such a good game. The music, just the feel of it, it still feels fast. And it's crazy for a 16-bit game to still feel like that.
So the Immortal had mostly good review scores. For instance, GamePro gave the game a 21 out of 25, while Computer Gaming World criticized it for being too linear for an RPG. Reviewers generally consider the graphics to be outstanding. They're, like we said earlier. There was a couple of advertisements and a write-up of the game in Volume 20 of Nintendo Power. In the advertisement, does not pull any punches.
No, it pretty much lays it out there like you're gonna die.
It really sets the tone, especially the second one. It's like it really feels like you're in that dungeon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's funny though too, looking at the advertisements and knowing what we know about this game, but it's like hot take it for what it is, but Mortal Kombat, Diablo, all the Dead Souls games, Dark Souls games, may not exist in the same way without Immortal.
That's a really profound statement. We actually also mentioned in one of our previous conversations, Archbishop Dracul and I, the similarity in the number of deaths or the ways that you can die to Dragon's Lair.
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like the creativity.
Mm-hmm.
But just so the viewers understand what we're looking at here, we're looking at an advertisement, which is a poster. It says it's not when, it's how, and then shows you a bunch of skulls that are pretty much destroyed in various ways. They have squid bait, skewered, slimed, chomped, bashed, fried, and it says the Immortal dead serious about living action, which is an interesting statement, but not even entirely sure what that means. But either way, yeah. And then the second one that we have here says the quick, the dead, the Immortal. So yeah, just so when we say that there's like it sets the tone, like yeah, it's not pulling any punches. It's saying you're gonna die. This is a hard game. It's preparing you for that.
I just wanted to say too, to address some of the critics that were unhappy with how linear the game was. The developer on the Genesis, who also worked on the NES version, said that if you classify it as an RPG, you'll be disappointed. He said, sure, there's wizards, goblins, magic, and inventory and battles, but it doesn't share other classic RPG features like character progression, random drops. He goes, Immortal is more about solving puzzles and advancing through the dungeon and the plot. It's closer to Myst than it is to Ultima. And then the producer, Don Traeger, said it was an early attempt at making an adventure game have a little bit more of an action component. We were in love with the gameplay, with the adventure gameplay of it, but we were trying to make it a little bit more action gameplay centric. So it's funny that like all these people were calling it an RPG because there was a wizard in there, but it was anything really but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally kind of stands on its own. It's not really, it has vibes of things like Diablo, right? It has the vibes of that. But it's not a Diablo game. Actually, I think this came out way before Diablo.
Oh yeah.
Like Diablo did not clone this game. This game really does stand on its own, in very strange ways.
Absolutely. Like other games borrow so much more from this than it borrows from other places.
Yeah.
You know, like you nailed it. You nailed it when you said it has like echoes and flavors of things, but it ultimately like creates like a wine all its own.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've played another game quite like the Immortal, actually.
I can say that too.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing.
Definitely.
They definitely hit a lot of originality in this game, for sure. Definitely groundbreaking for its time.
Let us discuss the 7 categories for which we execute judgment on the Immortal. Category 1 is the narrative.
A reading from the manual. The morning sun heats the jagged peaks as you follow the forgotten road down to the valley floor. The bleached ruins of great columned temples and towering citadels rise from the grassy plain like the bones of some colossal beast. Surely this was the ancient city of Erenok, destroyed by dragon's fire over 1,000 years ago. Mortimer spoke often of this city. Mortimer, your teacher in the arts of wizardry, surely he visited the fabled labyrinth of eternity buried beneath the ruins of Erenok. Perhaps this is where you will once again come face to face with your long-lost master. This is a reading from the manual.
I actually found the in-game story to be pretty good. But that's my pro. My con is the exposition is a little hollow. I really wish there was a little bit more of a backstory for who you are and why. Like sure, the only thing you really know about yourself is that you are a student of this wizard. But I wish there was a little bit more as to like who you are.
And I totally agree with that. I think quite honestly, I feel like half of the game, like the story is good. However, half of the game you're kind of figuring out what the story even is. They kind of set you up here, right? And then they kind of set you up at the beginning of the game where they say, oh, you had a dream of your master or something like that. But then the rest of it is almost kind of like fumbling through this dungeon trying to figure out exactly, well, to be honest, why you're even here to begin with. And so I feel like by the end of the story, you kind of see the whole plot, if you even make it that far. But there, for years, I played this game and never got past like level 3. So I never really got the full story until I actually decided for this review that I was going to sit down and grind through it, no matter how long it took me. And that's when I kind of got the full story at that point.
It's definitely got PC game story vibes to it. You know, where it's like you have to read the manual before you jump into the game. One of the things, like, as a writer that I had the biggest problem with the story is that it's like a comic book thing where in comic books you have characters speaking, you have characters thinking about what they want to say that we can see, and then you have monologue, like, you know, monologue narration. And I feel like Immortal fumbles big time because it goes from the main character speaking and then like this outside narrator speaking too, and there's no differentiation between the two. It's like in the beginning of the game, like it goes from like, you know, the main character talking, and then it goes to like somebody else like kind of talking to you, you know, and you're like, wait a second, like if you're smart you can pick up on it, but if you're just like some like 10-year-old kid, you're like, wait, is that the same person speaking to me? So let's be fair, the amount of text in this game for an adventure game and not an RPG, because now we know that it's not really an RPG, there's a lot of text and there's no voice acting. So I feel like for what they were able to accomplish, it's fine, but it could turn off a lot of casual gamers that don't want to, you know, try and read between the lines as much.
Well, one of the things that the story did for me, quite honestly, that I think is a plus, is that because of that, questionable, like, third voice, it kind of gave the whole thing a very, very creepy undertone. Like, you didn't really know what was going on, which was kind of... It was very enthralling.
Yeah, like what in the very first screen, it might be a good idea to move.
Mm-hmm.
What? Who said that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Like, that third voice is really kind of like you said, PC vibes there for sure. So I have a question for you, Patrick. In your book, The Minds Behind the Sega Genesis Games, specifically dealing with the Genesis version of this game for the Immortal, in that chapter you mention a quote from somebody that compares this game to Bard's Tale. And you say in the chapter that the comparison... I'm paraphrasing here, but you say something along the lines of that the comparison is fair. And I've never actually played the Bard's Tale, but I didn't know if you had any further insight on that. That just sort of piqued my interest. I figured I'd ask you about it.
Yeah, so Don Traeger said that, and it starts off, like, to create some context, was about Will Harvey. And he said Will Harvey had a lot of clout in terms of when he was on a project, and I would present it to the team for a yes or no vote. He generally got the benefit of the doubt. And he said there was a history of games like this, like the Bard's Tale, so it wasn't too far off. So, like, EA was a company that couldn't afford, like, a game to tank in the late 80s, because this is the thing a lot of people don't know, is, like, the original John Madden Football, which was developed by Robin Antonick, was basically a colossal failure on the PC, to the point where John Madden called it an abortion, because it didn't have the right amount of players on the field and stuff like that. So, like, EA had to be extremely careful. And the only reason why Madden ended up being a success is because they were able to take an arcade-style football game that they were creating and rebrand it as John Madden Football, and that's basically the John Madden Football that came out on the original Genesis that everyone acknowledges as the original John Madden Football, but it was not. So anyway, every time a developer had to pitch a game, they had to, like, kind of, like, hedge their bets. But the thing was, Traeger said there was a history of games like this, like with the Bard's Tale, so it wasn't far off. EA was pretty comfortable with it at the time. I think we were always trying to make it a little bit more action adventure, which is a little bit more of a crossover than your typical Bard's Tale style adventure. Immortal was more kind of an action adventure crossover. So again, if you read the rest of the chapter, they talked about how they wanted to actionize the adventure game. So that's why I think the Immortal feels like a PC adventure game. But then when you have, like, I mean, let's be fair, the fighting game mechanics, the music during the fights, they were trying to add that action. So it's like Bard's Tale sped up a little bit more, and then adding compelling combat that really wasn't in a game like Bard's Tale. But everything else kind of feels similar to it. So that's kind of like what they were going for.
Let us proceed to category 2, which is audio. My biggest pro for the audio is I thought the voice samples during combat was nice for the NES, because you didn't get that very often.
Agreed.
However, I found the music to be kind of middle of the road, and the sound effects, in my opinion, just didn't hit the mark at all.
I like the title track. I thought that was done really well. I feel like, for the most part, they were trying to do something that isn't really possible on the NES. And what I mean by that is I feel like they were going for almost an atmospheric, environmental type of music for when you're just running around the dungeon. And the chip on the NES doesn't really play well with that type of style. However, they did it pretty well considering what they had to work with. So although it wasn't great, I don't think that the environmental music that if that's what they were truly going for, because that's the way it felt to me, it wasn't great. But if that's what they were going for, they did a pretty good job at achieving it, given the parameters of what they had to work with.
I really like the diversity of the soundtrack. Obviously, I love the opening track. Totally has Bard's Tale vibes. Definitely has like New World Computing, Heroes of Might and Magic, King's Bounty vibes to it. Which another eventual EA property. They took those guys over too. The fight music, very high paced. It definitely it tried very hard, and there's plenty of diversity. It's definitely not on like the Konami or the Capcom or the Tecmo level, but it's definitely nothing to frown about either. Like it's like a hard 6.
That's fair. Let us proceed to Category 3, which is the gameplay.
A reading from the manual. There are many levels in the dungeon. Every time you complete a level, you'll get a string of numbers and letters called a certificate. You can enter a certificate to start where you left off. Vitality measures that special spark that keeps you healthy and strong. You lose vitality whenever monsters or bats inflict damage on you. When your vitality runs out, the wizard dies. In each level of the dungeon, you have 3 lives to complete the level. The labyrinth is a home for vicious vampire bats. You can protect yourself by casting fireballs at the bats. To cast a fireball, press button A or B. You always have a wizard's pack to carry important items. Most items can only be used once, and then they're gone, so be careful where you use them. You may be surprised when the floor unexpectedly vanishes beneath your feet, and you're left hanging above rows of iron spikes. Fortunately, there's always a chance of getting out. To swing out of a pit trap, press button A or B quickly and at a constant pace. To get up or down a ladder, just move the wizard up to it. He'll automatically climb or descend. Be careful going down ladders. Move the wizard only to the side of the opening with the ladder on it, or he'll fall. Piles of straw provide comfortable, safe places to rest. To sleep, move onto the straw and just stand there. After a moment, you'll lie down and go to sleep. Pay close attention to your dreams. When a monster attacks, you must fight until one of you wins. Press B button to jab, right and B to perform a forehand slash, and left and B to perform a backhand slash. You can duck your opponent's blows. The trick is to lean away from the monster's swing so you don't take damage. Hold left or right and press A to duck. As your fatigue goes up, you slow down. It takes you longer to swing when you're tired, and that gives your opponent more chances to hit you. This is a reading from the manual.
That was a lot to get through. But we had to kind of truncate that down, right, Father Avram?
We did. I was able to cut some things out, but it's just there's a lot going on. There's a lot in this game going on that they need to inform you of, or it would be a horrible experience. And if you go into this blind and you don't know this information, you definitely will have a horrible experience.
Yes, an understatement. Pros for me, as far as gameplay goes, is I feel like the game in its entirety really captures the essence of high adventure well. Like once you hit start and the actual gameplay screen comes up, just on that first little dungeon room, you see like that there's these weird like little like divots in the floor and like there's like a candle and it's just very intriguing and it kind of pulls you in. Which brings me to my next section, which is there are a lot of creative moments that really help sell the idea that this is a whimsical world. Like, and the thing that comes to mind for me is that gem wielding creature in like I think it was level 2, where he's in the corner and he's holding the gem and he's like, "This is mine and you can't have it." And then you like throw dust on his face and he's like, "Oh, here you go, take it." and then he like disappears into the wall in a very creative way where just the whole wall kind of turntables in on itself in the corner. Little things like that, little bits of flavor of almost makes it feel like the movie Labyrinth, in some instances. Another pro is, like we said earlier, like Dragon's Lair, there are so many creative ways to die in an awesome fashion. The first time I ever got skewered by one of those like spears that come up from the floor, I was just like, holy shit! Like just it legitimately scared me. And like seeing the guy writhing on the spear and then just going limp. Really well done. Some of the puzzle solving is kind of cool throughout the game, but it all isn't very terribly difficult to figure out. There are other reasons that make this game hard, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The Norlac encounter, awesome. That whole room was just awesome. I loved it. Cons. I would say this game is before its time, as it is vastly more entertaining to watch than to play. I found the isometric locomotion to be slow and hard to control at times. Combat gets kind of boring. I could never quite get the dodging right. And it became more of an annoyance over time than it did feel like something I wanted to like overcome. Here are the two worst things about the game, in my opinion. The bats are completely unnecessary and annoying. I consider them a design flaw, punishing the player for taking a moment to stop and think, which is necessary in a lot of instances. And I reject that there is a strategy for defeating them in a reasonable amount of time. You might as well roll dice. My advice, if you have a little vitality left and you're entering a new room, just give up and spare yourself the frustration. It seems as though the less vitality you have, the more ferocious the bat will be, and the odds of killing them before they will kill you in that situation is approximately 3,720 to 1.
That's a very specific calculation, Archbishop.
It's a quote, Father Avram. I can't even begin to explain to you how to control the magic carpet in level 4. It's truly some of the worst controls I have ever experienced in a video game. Those are my cons.
The physics for the magic carpet are utterly f***ed. It's very, very, very easy to hop on that magic carpet and you're like, oh, okay, cool, let's fly across this room, and then you realize that the D-pad is not just directional, it is acceleration. And so as soon as you realize that, you can very, very easily get majorly out of control, lose control of the carpet, start ping-ponging around the room, and you're gonna die. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You will die at least your first dozen times on this magic carpet.
Dozen?
At least a dozen.
I think one of the big problems is everyone expected controlling a magic carpet to be fun when it actually feels like you're controlling like one of the skaters from Skater Die or the bike from Paperboy, but not designed as well. Like I feel like somebody's like cousin that worked on Paperboy or like Skater Die was like, oh, that's what they did in this game. Let's try and, let's do something like that. And that's not the way a magic carpet is supposed to feel. So
I think it's more specific than that. I think it's from Marble Madness, because it feels very much like Marble Madness on crack cocaine. You accelerate very fast. It's but not when you first press it. So like you're pressing the button, you're like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. Oh wait, I'm going a little fast. Oh, I'm going too fast. The ramp up is way too fast. It's sluggish at first, but then it just quickly gets out of control.
And then the isometric camera doesn't help.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all. No. So it could have been good. It could have been good, but it wasn't. The other things I'd like to mention in regards to gameplay is the combat. I'd like to piggyback on what Archbishop Dracul said there. I think the combat, I had fun with it at first, but it gets boring, and it also feels clunky. There is a learning curve there with the combat, but with respect to what they were trying to do with the game, especially considering the limitations they have in regards to memory space and everything, I think they did it well. But it's still clunky, still gets boring, because you do fight a lot in the game. There's a lot of characters to fight. And they're also pretty much the same character. You've think 4 different variations of characters, or 3 or 4 variations of characters to fight. And then finally, the other thing I'd like to mention in regards to the gameplay is I love the Wizards pack, actually. I love the way that they handled the inventory in this game. I thought it was different. It's usually that you have a spot in some form of grid fashion, and this goes well beyond Diablo or anything like that. I'm not even just, Legend of Zelda, right? Everything is usually like you have a spot in your inventory that is a series of tiles, usually a block of 4 8x8 tiles to represent the thing that you have, and you just go and you select it, and that's it. This was much more than that. I think it was a very beautiful portrayal of inventory in the best way possible, especially considering what they were trying to do. And I mean that for controls, too. It was almost fun to navigate, in a way.
For what it's worth, it's so hard for a game that doesn't have established characters on a console the likes of the NES to allow the player to have any type of feeling. So the fact that, you guys are discussing that the game was creepy or you were intrigued, that's very easy to do when you have Mario or when you have Ryu from Ninja Gaiden or Simon Belmont, and you have Contra or Double Dragon, and you have these characters that have this type of raw charisma that make you want to play, and especially with a beat 'em up or adventure game. We've talked about this before. Critics thought that this was an RPG. It was not. It's not quite an adventure game. It's not quite an action game. It has characters that were never seen before, that were never seen after. So the fact that you even felt a thing playing this game means that it's a success.
I mean, I can agree with that. Definitely the atmosphere and the feel of the game is remarkable. I have to say I don't like the fireball mechanic either with the bats. I think that is aggravating, to say the least. I just found myself spamming fireballs in every single direction until the bats died.
Do you guys think the game would be too easy without the bats?
I think it would still be quite difficult. The bats for me seemed more like, oh, we can't just have them sit there. We got to keep the action going if we want this to be, in fact, sort of an action sort of take on an RPG game. That's what it felt like. It felt like a kind of like a last minute thing that they added to keep you from just sitting there and looking at your surroundings and figuring things out. I could be totally wrong.
No, I actually would have preferred a couple of changes. The the encounters with the bats, as aggravating as they were, actually made me sad that they didn't do all the combat in the isometric view. Right? You get into the combat, and then you're pulled into a mini game to resolve this combat. I would have liked it if they could have handled it all on the same screen and keep that chaos. And then while you're fighting something, you could get skewered by a spear. That would have been harder, and also I think more immersive than the mechanic that they have.
Just riffing off of what you just said, that me and Father Avram Patrick had a conversation about this a little bit yesterday, and one of the things I told him, I was like, it feels very much like a PC game on a console.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Mm-hmm.
Another game that did the same exact thing was The Last Ninja by Jalico, and that was a complete failure. This one, at the very least, is playable.
Sure. When you guys eventually play Bard's Tale, you're going to feel very similar. You're going to feel like it's a PC game for the NES. I'm sure some people that play Ultima on the NES feel that way sometimes too, but those games made it out all right on console. They're playable on console. So, yeah.
I'm very curious. Were there any mechanics in the Immortal that you specifically liked?
I liked the fireballs. I just thought if you could have used you guys nailed it before. If you could have used the fireballs as a way to not kill bats and used it for the goblins and the other characters, if it would have been more, if we would have been able to keep the combat in that main screen, like you said, then it would almost feel like an isometric Legend of Zelda in a way.
Yeah.
Or like a Diablo.
Yeah, or Diablo. I mean, because that's the thing. I mean, look at those character models. Does that not look and feel like the original Diablo?
Yeah, it's the DNA of Diablo for sure.
Yeah, so I would have much rather have seen everything. I'm absolutely not a fan of the mini game. And then because this is the thing too, I really think the score of the game is really solid. And then when you go to the fighting game, the music changes to a very lewd and thrusting-esque type of music that we won't discuss here on the show. It deviates from that medieval theme to a very Holmes-esque, style of audio, and it takes something away from what the game was going for. So that really aggravated me. But I think the fireball on its own is a lot of fun. It's misappropriated entirely.
100% agree.
Navigating around the dungeon sometimes is a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. Collision detection and it's not ET bad, but there are definitely times when you have to be a little bit too perfect when you're navigating around, which could get totally irritating. But if that was fixed and the combat system was cleaned up a little bit, it could be a lot more fun. It's like Diablo with the fighting engine of Blades of Steel, in a medieval setting. That's kind of what it feels like at times.
What puzzle in this game was to me the most fun and the most frustrating was the room. I think it's towards the end of the game, if I remember correctly. I think it's almost at the total end of the game, where you have to navigate across the floor, and if you step on the wrong tile, you get eaten.
Oh no, I couldn't get past that. That was where the game ended for me.
Yeah, because it was you had to use that acoustic thing, the resonator thing, to tell if you were approaching a bad area or not. And so you just have to kind of discover, and that only lasts for a little while, that tool, in order to get the right pitch to see if you're in a safe zone or not. That only lasts for a little while. So you kind of basically just have to grind through lives and discover this path. I ended up, once I figured out what the path was, I ended up holding off on the tool and walking the path without the tool. And then once I got to the area that was questionable, like turn it on again, and just kind of like literally grind my way through this room. Most frustrating room, hands down, but also probably the most fun in regards to, I guess, complexity. It was probably the most complex puzzle in the game, I'd say.
It just seemed like the little thing that you use was broken. It would always change tone. Sometimes it wouldn't change tone, I'd die. Sometimes it would, I'd die. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, it's very finicky.
I mean, I think it just goes back to like what we've been saying the entire time. Like, there was definitely effort here to try and do something that hadn't been done yet on the NES. A game like this if it was released today, probably would have been repatched a few times and been significantly better because of it after a few thousand people played it and went on message boards and did this and did that. But like, for a one-off effort, this game, I feel like, does a lot of things really different and a lot better than anyone else that tried to. This is a lot better than some of the D&D games that came out on the NES like before this and stuff. So
I'm just gonna say here for the record, based on what you just said, I would love to see a remake of this game. Like, still, retro style, still pixelated, but with all of the, more modern bells and whistles. That would be a lot of fun, actually.
Let us proceed to category 4, which is the graphics. I said it earlier, but like the art and the animation on this game was eye-catching. Like, it was something you just didn't see on the NES. The animation was fluid, a touch of hyperrealism. I suspect they used an animation technique called rotoscoping to get that hyperrealism, which is basically the process of using video reference and copying every frame. Obviously, they couldn't copy every frame, but I'm pretty sure they copied key poses along the way. Prince of Persia used the same method. So the modern-day equivalent of this technique is probably motion capture. The interesting thing about it is games these days, everybody uses motion capture, and in a lot of cases, it doesn't fit the tone of the game. But here, in this game, it does. My only nitpick critique on the art is that there is no variation to the look of the dungeons other than color. Now, that is probably because all of the memory went toward the animation.
Yeah, that's probably accurate.
I'm kind of willing to overlook that.
I think the artwork goes above and beyond what you would expect out of a Nintendo game. Really, by leaps and bounds. They trick you in so many ways. Like, they for some reason, when I look at this game, it feels like it should be on the SNES. And that really is just a testament to the amount of skill that the artist had. Because I mean, it feels like you're not looking at, like, most people understand the limitation of the 3 colors in a sprite on the NES. That's technically 4, but the 4th one is always used for transparency. So, but it's 3 colors that you see on a sprite on the screen. And when you play this game, it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like you have that same limitation as other games.
I dare anyone to put that final battle scene up against the first generation of SNES games, and some of them may have a problem identifying the Immortal as an NES game.
I will go so far as to say there is nothing like that dragon on the NES.
I'd also like to interject exactly how much of a pain in the balls that last battle was. I know I'm kind of meshing categories together here now, but
it had to be said.
It had to be said.
Absolutely.
Let us proceed to Category 5, which is Box Art and Presentation.
A reading from the back of the box. When nightmares come to life, you discover you're not immortal. You're a mighty wizard in search of your lost master Mortimer. Venture into the dungeon and solve the mysteries of each level. Unravel the secrets of the immortal. Dodge/jab. You control the action in battle. Encounter animated creatures like you've never seen. Beware, objects hold powerful secrets. Use correctly to survive. Unleash magical powers to change form, fly, and shrink. Can you endure deadly traps, oozing slime, and invisible monsters? A reading from the back of the box.
So I really don't have any cons on this one. I would say the box art is like a really nice piece of artwork. The only thing that I have that I would say goes against that is the fact that it doesn't really do a good job of telling you what the essence of the game is. The Genesis cover, on the other hand, totally tells you what you're getting yourself into. It's a picture of the Grim Reaper with like swinging his scythe at you, while the cover of the NES is an extreme close up of an old man's face.
Yeah, the box art feels it's nice. It's done very well, but it feels cliche, and I'm going to follow that up with this game probably set the tone for what I'm thinking is cliche. So there is that. So although I'm calling it cliche, it probably was responsible for creating that niche, as it were.
I would say too that the mediocre box art was released in 1990, and the awesome Sega Genesis box art was released a year later with the Genesis version of the game. And I think definitely some market research, they definitely got some feedback from people saying that, like, Ernest Borgnine on the cover of a video game isn't going to sell it the same way that, Ghost Rider with the scythe would, so without that cover, which again, I don't necessarily have anything against, but again, it screams mid to late 80s PC game cover. And the Genesis cover screams 1990s Sega Genesis. So it's just, it was a learning experience. And EA, like I said before, EA was absolutely positively learning as they went through this. So
I'd like to add, in regards to presentation, the manual is huge for an NES game. It includes a tutorial for like the first level and drops tons of hints. The gameplay section, as I read earlier, is super long. For an NES manual, this thing is huge. And I think that is presented really well.
Yeah, 33 pages.
I miss that so much.
That's long. That's long for an NES manual. That is really long.
Yeah, but I did like the inclusion of the Codex of the Serpent at the end of the manual. I thought that was really cool. I mean, that's more of a hints and cheats thing, but they didn't have to do that and do it in such a like high production value sort of way.
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about, actually.
Well, starting on page 17, I believe, is the Codex of the Serpent.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And it gives you hints for each level, but not blatant, like I'm gonna tell you exactly what to do kind of hits, kind of like very vague, which is intriguing and prepares you for what you're in for.
Yeah, it has a very kind of a Holy Grail book type of feel to it, like Indiana Jones' Holy Grail book, the book that his father has.
Yeah.
It very much has that kind of a feel to it.
Even like a Rankin and Bass, like fire and ice kind of thing going on too. I love it.
Yeah, the manual's very nice. which I think is all part of the presentation.
Let us proceed to category 6, which is fun factor. Aside from what we've already established, the fact that it's intriguing, that it pulls you in, and that like you die in all these crazy ways, and there's this whimsical side to it that keeps you going. Here are my cons. I found it to be a chore to play, just because of the amount of dying required in order to advance. Level 4 is the furthest I got in the game without help. To illustrate my point further, today is a Saturday. Story time with Archbishop Dracul. And there happens to be a pending snowstorm. My yard is cleaned up and the gas tanks for the generators are full in case of a power outage. There was literally nothing left to do but to sit and wait for the storm. I picked up my controller to play some more Immortal and paused. I put the controller down and contently stared out the window instead. I would rather be bored than play this game. However, what I can say is that from the perspective of 1990, this game was a head-turner. The animation and character designs are outstanding. It's an isometric game, which wasn't really common on the NES, and it brought an arcade flavor to the dungeon crawler genre. So for that, I really appreciate it.
Okay, so at face value, when I played this, I didn't really have fun. However, I found myself wanting to come back. This is so weird. It feels weird even saying this. Although I didn't feel like I was having fun in the moment, and I've experienced probably more frustration than fun, putting down the game and leaving, I was like, man, I can't wait to go back and try to get through that level, which is actually kind of what fun is. I don't know if that's like, I don't know if it's more, maybe it's not fun, maybe it's more determination based, but it made me want to come back. Almost like a book that you can't put down, like you need to read through to the end. It had that effect on me, and for more reasons than just trying to get through the game for this review. It really, I had fun, like I said before, kind of navigating the inventory, finding these items, trying to figure out how to use these items, the time and the place to use the items in the right location. That was fun to me.
On its surface, as a game historian, I absolutely positively appreciate this game. I appreciate the effort. I appreciate what's in its DNA and how it influenced the video game industry moving forward. I'm not really going to get into how a lot of the EA people felt like Mortal Kombat stole the idea of fatalities from this game. But I will say, ultimately, this game, if I could sum this game up to someone, I would say this game is like finding a beautiful woman on a dating website that agrees to go out with you, and upon meeting her at the location for the date, you find out that she is a proctologist that doesn't speak the same language as you. So now you are across the table with a beautiful woman that you can't understand, that could probably hurt you in ways that you've never experienced in your entire life. So now you have to make a decision. Do you want to try and find out the language in which this woman communicates? Or do you want to just leave? And the fact that you may leave and not know, and she may not know why you're leaving and may inflict great damage upon you, could be quite a situation, but it would definitely be an adventure as well. So at the end of the day, it's like a little disjointed, a little all over the place, but like it's definitely different from everything else released at the time. The same way dating a proctologist that doesn't speak your language would be for a date. So it's different, it's unique, it's memorable, but it's not that fun. It's not Contra fun. It's not Contra spray gun fun. It's not Bionic Commando latching on to stuff fun. It's not Double Dragon domestic violence to start the game and carry her away fun. But it's memorable.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to for me. Like that's why I had such a hard time putting my finger on it. Like it's not like it's really fun. It's just that it somehow pulls you in. Like you're compelled, the power of the immortal compels you.
I would say if you have a chance to play it, definitely play it, but it's not for everyone. Let us proceed to category 7, which is technical. For me, as I said before, the animation quality of this game is an anomaly on the NES. And they must have done so many tricks to get that many frames into the cartridge. That's all I'm going to say about technical.
There's a lot to say about technical here, but I mean, I'm not going to go. I mentioned a lot of stuff already with the physics, with the flying carpet. It just felt buggy at times. I've had some trouble, speaking of bugs, I've had some trouble with the ladders, where I'm sure that I approached the ladder from the right direction and fell down anyway.
What the hell was that, by the way? That was awful. Oh my god, it's like, yes, there's the end of the level. No!
Exactly. That's exactly what happened to me a couple of times, and that was buggy.
Just so we're clear on that, if you go down a ladder in this game, and you don't go down the side of the hole with the ladder, you fall to your death.
You have to go down the side of the ladder, but even doing that, there was a handful of times that I tried to do that and fell down anyway. And I feel like it was sort of like I didn't hit it just quite right, and so it thought that I was on the side rather than actually on the side with the ladder. It's an isometric engine in the NES. It's they definitely did something different here. And I think in this case it kind of breaks a little bit.
To go back what we were discussing before, what I was telling you guys about what the team at EA was doing backwards reverse engineering of the NES and the Sega Genesis at the time. It's obvious that these guys did their homework in terms of what the NES was capable of visually and under the hood, but then their inexperience designing console games rears its ugly head. So it's like, yes, you can have a game that looks beautifully and does a lot more, but then again, these are errors that you would really see in a PC game, and you wouldn't see so many of these or in let's be fair, in an Atari 2600 game than you would in NES games. Bugs like this didn't really they didn't rear their ugly head so much. So again, it's like watching a young athlete that has all this natural talent and understands the game, but is still kind of like realizing that they don't have to do all this. Or it's like, to make a stupid like professional wrestling reference, like, you have wrestlers like their first year that are willing to jump through cars and through tables and stuff. And so like an older wrestler is like, bro, you don't have to do that to tell a story. So I feel like technically the game is super strong, but then like visually it's super strong what they're able to do. But then, yeah, a lot of like the things that they could have, if they would have had a couple more seasoned members of the team on there. It's like you guys nailed it in the beginning. Archbishop Dracul nailed it when he was like, Will Harvey doesn't have that sexy of resume at this point. And to be fair too, it's like when I was speaking to the developers, the people that ported this game on Nintendo and Genesis rarely spoke to Harvey. Harvey did the original PC version. So you had a whole other team that was trying to take that code and get that code to work on the NES. So that could be another reason why I would love to play. I would probably love to go on like Abandonware and play the original PC version and see if the PC version has some of these problems. Maybe they don't. Worth noting too is the Sega Genesis version has an extra level compared to the NES version as well. So
with the spider.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So lots of stuff to think about.
Which is creepy as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I am glad that I don't know what you're talking about.
We have found your weakness, Father Avram, and I will exploit it.
Just to wrap up technical, though, I think I do have to mention in regards to performance. The thing ran in spite of all the beautiful visuals, in spite of the animation, no slowdowns. This thing performed, which is remarkable.
Let us proclaim the hints and cheats of our game.
A reading from the manual. Pick up every item you come across. There are no bad items in the Immortal. Some items can harm you, but only when you use them at the wrong time or in the wrong place. Always search rooms thoroughly, and don't leave any items behind. Important. Don't drop items you'll need later. Sometimes you need to set certain items down in order to use them. For example, you may use certain gems by setting them on the ground. But watch out. If you set an item down in the wrong place, make sure you pick it back up where you leave, or you won't find it in your wizard's pack. Only useful items go with you to the next level. Some items only function on a particular level. Before you descend to the next level, the magic of the labyrinth will remove any items you don't need from your wizard's pack. Vary your attack. Never do just one kind of attack. Use combinations. Jab, backhand slash, forehand slash, etc. Duck to tire out your opponent. Good strategy is to duck your opponent's swings and let his fatigue rise. Wait until he's tired before you make your attack. Read every message you come across. Messages give you important clues that will help you solve the mysteries of the Immortal. It's important that you read every message that appears. Not all doors are unlocked. If a door is locked, a message will appear telling you whether you have the key or not. Always search for items. You can search for items just by moving the wizard to the area you want to search. If there is anything of interest in the area, a message will appear telling you what it is. Remember, always write down your certificates. A reading from the manual. The hint I'd just like to add to this is that in order to get out of the pit, you need to tap either A or B. There has been confusion where people think they need to tap A and B.
I thought it was alternating, so I would always die. I had such a hard time with that.
Yeah, so you have to tap one button at a consistent pace. It doesn't need to be super fast. It doesn't need to be both buttons. Just pick a button and tap it until you're out of the pit. And it actually does work every time. Confirmed.
I'm going to try that next time I play this, which I don't know when that will be.
And now, brethren, let us offer each other the body of price. According to the Electronics Boutique Spring 1991 catalog, this game sold for $47.99, which according to the data.bls.gov CPI inflation calculator, today is worth $110.13 in 2023. That's pretty remarkable. That's an expensive game. According to pricecharting.com today, you can find a loose copy, just cart only for $15.99, box only for $21.25, manual only $9.49, which I think is remarkable considering the size. I feel like it should be worth more than that. Complete in box $40.63. And what really strikes me hard here, brand new in box $67.50. That is dirt cheap, actually, for a brand new sealed in-box copy of this game. I feel like that's dirt cheap.
And the interesting thing about it is that when you look at pricecharting.com, the statistics have risen, the price has risen quite a bit over the past 10 years. It's tripled in value over the past 10 years.
But most NES games, as you know, you get brand new in box sealed. You're talking about hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at trying to get a sealed version of Deadly Towers, even though we sent it to hell, and that was roughly $300. for a sealed, like, graded copy. You know what I mean? Like, it was...
So this price is striking.
Yeah, very much so. Let us now execute judgment upon the Immortal and decide which of the 7 cardinal sins it has committed. Father Avram, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
In regards to narrative, the Immortal has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
In regards to narrative, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
In regards to narrative and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation. Father Avram, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
In regards to audio, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
In regards to audio, the Immortal has committed no fault.
In regards to audio and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
In regards to gameplay and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation. Father Avram, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, the Immortal has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, the Immortal has committed no fault.
In regards to graphics and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art and presentation, the Immortal has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art, the Immortal has committed no fault.
In regards to box art and presentation, and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
In regards to fun factor and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation. Father Avram, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, the Immortal has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, the Immortal has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
In regards to technical and in the presence of this assembly, the Immortal has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation. I now invoke the Talisman of Absolution!
The talisman is only used in categories of exemplary status.
And that I am doing for graphics.
I second the invocation.
I third the invocation.
So the talisman of absolution is meant to be literally an accolade on one specific category that has the power to override one of the other cardinal sins. So this is very unusual. This hasn't happened yet. But that means, wait a minute now, that we had 4 cardinal sins for this game, and now there are 3.
The Immortal, by the authority invested in me, redeem you of any faults which you have committed, and hereby revere you as a jewel in the crown of the Nintendo Entertainment System.
This concludes tonight's service. Remember, our liturgy does not simply come to an end. Those assembled are sent forth to bring the fruits of the ministry to the world.